Welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My name is Alice Li Hagan. Today, I'm honored to interview this guest of mine, and none other than Jay Fidell. Thank you, Jay, for joining me as a guest, founder of ThinkTech Hawaii, and the person who gave me this opportunity to be a host on your program.
Thank you, Alice. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Jay, I know you're very well known in the community. You're a long-time business lawyer. I know you are considered a 3D attorney, and somebody told me that you call yourself a recovering attorney. Can you tell us why that's the case?
Well, 3D means 3 digits, and my bar number is 720. Actually, now that I think about it, it's actually 720-0. So there's another component that we don't think much about, but it's not just 720. I was admitted in 1968, as I recall. They had a residence requirement in those days, and I started practicing in 1971, and I practiced from then until a couple of years ago when I went off counsel and then ultimately retired. So my number is low, and I'm with those old guys, and I remember the things that happened then. You know how your memory fails, but I remember those things, you know. So short-term memory's gone, the long-term memory takes over, and I remember all those things. It's fun to remember those things, honestly.
I'm sure, but let me ask you, so if you're 720-0, so what's the most recent number then?
Oh, what's way up there? I can't tell you exactly what they're issuing now, but it's got to be, you know, between 5,000 and 10,000. It's way up there.
Oh my gosh,
maybe more.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're an old hand then? Is that what you?
I'm an old hand. Yeah, I was there in the rough and ready days. You know, there's this big dispute. I shouldn't say dispute. A lot of people feel that back in the old days was all aloha. You could the word was the bond, and everybody was very considerate of each other, and that may be the case for, you know, part of the practice then, but the other part of the practice was it was Wild West, and all kinds of amazing, surprising things happened.
I think I can do another show about you being an attorney and all the experiences and stories that you have.
Anytime.
But my last question, why a recovering attorney?
Oh, recovering attorneys, it came to the conclusion a few years ago after, you know, practicing in traces, in the chair, so to speak, for something more than 40 years, actually more than that, because I had time in the service before I was practicing in the Coast Guard. But I came to the conclusion that there must be another chapter in life, you know, and that you had to maybe take a little time to live your dream. So at the time, I had been involved in Hawaii Public Radio and ThinkTech Hawaii on Hawaii Public Radio for 7 or 8 years. I decided I want to spend more time in that, and we started doing video and doing our conference programs and so forth, and I wanted to put more time into that. So I sort of, you know, cooled it with the practice, retired from the practice, and put more time into this. This is my next chapter, but I believe that everybody should have multiple chapters. It's a great, you know, extravagance in a way, but it's also, it adds to the quality of your life.
That's a very nice way of putting it, extravagance.
Well, it is. You give up your skill, you give up, you know, predictably money-earning experience, and you take risks, and you have adventures, and why not?
Is that what happened to you?
I have risks and adventures.
Okay.
And I no longer practice, so I traded the one for the other.
But why journalism? Because it's interesting. Let me retrace this, because when I first met you about a year ago, you said, yeah, I'll let you do a show. I don't know if you remember, because I was trying to promote an education, an MBA program at the university. So I met you at an event, and you offered me this opportunity, which has been an amazing journey, and it's actually really nice to be able to sit down here to talk to you. But I was just thinking, you talk about extravagance and having, I guess, different adventures in life. Before I came to North America, I was for a while aspiring to be a journalist. I actually went to Beijing and the Tiananmen Square incident, which was over 25 years ago. So I was an interpreter. But then I realized that no, journalism was not for me, because at that time I was sitting at a table with maybe 10 to 11 foreign correspondents from a lot of those big name news organizations. I looked at them, I said, that's not what I thought journalism was, because there was a lot of waiting around, a lot of drinking. And I said, no, that's not it. But when I came here, it's certainly very different. So now coming back to you, you've given me this opportunity, then now I'm going to ask you, why did you transition from an attorney to be a journalist? What was the draw?
Journalism isn't the exact word I would use for what we do. We create here, as you know, a platform for people like you who are going to look into questions and find witnesses to, your propositions, whatever they are, and bring them here and see if you can, get the real story from them. It's like journalism isn't really it. You're only talking with one person or maybe a couple of people.
Okay.
And so you're getting, their story. It's really about doing interviews with people who can tell you, hopefully, the truth, or at least the truth as far as they're concerned. And that's really exciting. It's like giving them therapy and they give you therapy. It's building relations with people who have, thoughts that are worth expressing. And that's a real kick. Now, as for journalism, what we were doing on ThinkTech radio back with HPR is we were advocating for the development of a tech industry. ThinkTech, middle name. But the more we looked at this, I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to say this. The more we looked at this, the more we realized that developing a tech industry was connected to every single other thing in the state of Hawaii. The original name of ThinkTech Hawaii was Save Hawaii. Because we saw trends that were of concern. And we felt that people had to become aware of those trends and deal with those trends. And, the metric of it would be the development of a tech industry. But there were so many other things that had to be problems that had to be resolved in the process. And so ThinkTech Hawaii is really all about everything that happens in the state.
Okay, so this is, as you say, a forum to foster public conversation, and I know in your mission statement of the organization, it's to raise public awareness.
It's to provide civic engagement. We want people to engage. Awareness was step one, and we used that phrase, as to describe our thought process back when. But we've changed it since, and we've decided that you can't just have awareness; you have to engage with people. And then, of course, inherent in that is you can't just engage with people; you have to move to the action phase. And one of these days, we'll talk about action.
Okay. Now, let's go back to the name of ThinkTech Hawaii, tech. And I know that you're passionate about technology, entrepreneurialism, entrepreneurship, globalism. I mean, it's all about ThinkTech Hawaii. What drew you to technology? You were saying that technology is in every aspect of the state. Can you tell us a little bit about your insight?
Well, you have to divide technology in, I'd say, three parts. The first part is that you use it. Here, we're using it. And we're using it in the studio. It enables our lives, not only here, but everywhere. And that's fairly pedestrian, really. I mean, we're buying it like gifts from afar, like cargo comes and it's good. It helps us. And so, Best Buy is always going to do well in Hawaii. We're a land of first adopters, and we need to adopt technology, and we do. The second phase, the second part, the element of that, is that there are people in the community who help deliver the technology to you. I call them the integrators. And they know a lot. They're experts, and you're not an expert, and they will build your system for you.
Okay.
And they're the professionals, professional integrators. And the third part is the people who actually build the technology. They make it, they create it, they invent it. They code the programs, they design the devices, and they are the ones who have the biggest reward out of all this. So we have the consumer guys, and we have, you know, a fair industry of integrators. What we don't have is the high octane people, the startups, you know, the young entrepreneurs who will actually apply all of their creativity and design these devices and build this software. That's the tech industry I'm talking about.
Why do you say we don't have those people?
We don't. We don't have enough. We're struggling. The state, as a matter of policy, has been trying since John Burns and George Ariyoshi. That's a long time ago. You were just a child. I think I was too. Way before Tiananmen Square, okay?
We'll leave it at that. It was a long time ago.
But back when, you know, we had state policy and we had our leadership, you know, very thoughtful leaders telling us we had to diversify the economy, that we could not rely on tourism and real estate and construction to keep going, that we had to find something we could export other than tourism. So it had to be technology, and they never really got traction. Sorry, Alice, they never really got traction. The one great statement of that policy was Act 221, which was adopted around the turn of the century. During the Lingle administration, it was essentially killed. People, you know, resented it. They resented the idea of providing incentives to young people, thought that these people did not deserve incentives of that cost to the state. And as a result, a lot of the programmers who came here, a lot of the people who were local people who went to Silicon Valley in the 90s and returned to build that industry in the turn of the century, went back again. We lost them. We lost what little knitting up we had achieved in the years prior. So right now, yes, we have a couple of companies that do this, and maybe one of them will strike gold, who knows? But we don't have nearly the industry we had hoped for, at least the people I know anyway, in the early 2000s. That would have changed the way the state works, that would have changed the state economy. I mean, there was one, David Watermole got up and made a speech one time in one of our programs. You don't realize that if tourism brings $12 billion into the state, or $10 billion per annum, one good drug invented here could bring in far more than that. Just one drug, one company could bring in far more than that.
Jay, you're very passionate about this, but I have tons of questions because now you said that the government wasn't willing to foster this industry and they killed the bill. Why is that the case? Why did they do that?
Oh, it was very controversial.
Okay.
There was a group that opposed it, didn't like spending the money, didn't like the way it worked, didn't like favoring this group of technology entrepreneurs against other entrepreneurs, and they killed it. I mean, what is really interesting was that in retrospect, the amount of money that had been spent was not much, and it was way less, for example, than the tax credits we now offer the solar photovoltaic community. But in those days, it was treated as a lot of money. So there was excitement about it, but you know, technology requires capital. It's a high octane, high speed kind of entrepreneurship, and you can't do it mom and pop style. You can't do bootstrap, or at least let me put it this way, you can, but the chances aren't nearly as good as if you have capital to work with.
Well, Jay, let's take a break because I guess I see things happening. There are accelerators. The energy accelerator just got $80,000 from a Japanese partner. So it seems that things are happening again. So I'd like your comment on what has been developing in the state maybe after the break.
Sure.
Wonderful. My guest is Jay Fidell. He is the founder, of course, of ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll be right back. This is Alice Li Hagan of Business Education Spotlight.
Hi, my name is Andrew Howard. I'm an astronomer at the Institute for Astronomy at the University of Hawaii up in Manoa. I'd like to tell you about the annual open house that we're having. This year, it is on April 6th, 11 to 4 p.m. It's an all ages event, kids, grown-ups, even people in between, everyone is welcome. We have a lot of really fun activities. You get to meet astronomers, look at yourself in an infrared camera, play with Legos, make robots, look at videos. You can even make some of the kids like to make comets out of gravel and snow. Even adults like to do that too. You'll be able to look at the sun with a solar camera safely. It's really a great activity. We do this every year in April, and I hope to see you this year. Thanks.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My name is Alice Li Hagan, and my guest today is Jay Fidell, founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. Jay, let's continue with your commentary about the entrepreneurial and the tech sector here in Hawaii. You remember the things that happened a long time ago until this day. And I guess I only see snippets of the action. And at the university, it seems that there are a lot of excitement about, say, the accelerator or the Pacific Asia Center for Entrepreneurship. There's Energy Accelerator, there's startups. So,
they could really turn into something, and they are Phoenix-like in the sense that they grew on the bones of earlier organizations. But it remains to be seen whether the public mood and the legislative mood and the grant mood, if you will, the grant community will support them to the extent necessary to really build an industry. The jury is way out on this. Let me give you a snapshot of how it was in, say, the year 2000, because notwithstanding my lapses in memory, I do remember what happened in that year.
You have a good memory.
First of all, these kids, as I mentioned, were coming back from the mainland. Act 221 had been a message to them. It was a message that the state of Hawaii cared about building a tech industry, was willing to put its money where its mouth is. People were really excited. I mean, it was heart-rending. It was a touching experience. To the state of Hawaii to be sending this message back to the mainland saying, come back, Sheba. You can come here and we will embrace you. We will support you. We will give you whatever you need. I mean, this is like China bringing back, the overseas Chinese and giving them laboratories and benefits and companies. This was happening too,
Okay.
A few years ago. We will welcome you. We are welcoming you. And the right of return, if you will. So they came back, and that was so wide-eyed. I mean, they were wonderful. There were lots of parties. There was something called the Hawaii Technology Trade Association. And they would have a party. It would be amazing. It would be the ultimate mixer kind of thing, with hundreds of people would show up, and the networking was phenomenal, blow you away.
Is that association still in existence then? Is the association still in existence?
No, it went away.
Oh.
And then there was the Hawaii Science and Technology Council, which was sort of an outgrowth of that. And it was more big money. It was an attempt to connect science and technology out of the university and all that, and fund entrepreneurial activities. And that went away. That folded. Now let me think for a minute. I don't know if we have enough time in the show, of another successor organization that took the role of those two. I'll be thinking. I'm still thinking. Are you thinking? I can't think of any.
Okay.
Okay, and then you have Manoa Innovation Center, which was built in the George Ariyoshi day.
Okay.
It was a statement that the state believed in technology. It was going to offer this incubation space. It was going to put its money where its mouth. It was a very nice project, a beautiful building, and it was filled with entrepreneurs who really cared about it. But over time, less money, less activity, less support. And High Tech Development Corporation now is hanging in that building with its thumbnails because the university wants it back for office space. And they still have to work out where they're going. It's not clear where they're going. And if they can't find a place to go, they won't exist. So the one state agency responsible, to develop technology in the state of Hawaii is under threat. Okay, so that's one part of the way the dynamic has worked. In the early 2000s, the legislature was thinking about funding way beyond Act 221. There was one bill in about 2005 that would have created a $100 million fund just for technology. It was amazing. Everybody was so high. There was a couple of public companies that went public here out of Hawaii. That's not happening right now. And kids were excited, all I can say. So if you fast forward, and Kaka'ako was going to be the center of that.
Oh,
This is not now, but then, 10, 15 years ago. Kaka'ako, in the vision of Ed Cadman, who was the then dean of the medical school as it got built, he saw a campus of big pharma, national pharma companies right there in Kaka'ako. covering all that green grass.
And if I can interrupt you, I spoke with somebody just the day before. They said that UH has the highest patent. I guess there's a university ranking. We have the highest number of patents, but in terms of commercialization, we are really.
Well, it's true. You know the Office of Technology Transfer at the university. They actually had a full-time guy up there, and he was going to help you get a patent, and he left. I think he left because the university wasn't paying attention, wasn't funding him. He had no money, no staff, and it wasn't helping anyone. So he took off, and this is probably in the middle 2000s.
I see.
And it has been essentially unstaffed since then, and hasn't done anything for anybody. So, the problem, they have a new person now, Billy Richardson, who's a local lawyer and tech guy, but I'm not sure it's done any more than it was doing before. So the real question is, why has the university lost traction, never gained traction actually, on commercializing the work, of its researchers? It hasn't done that, and as they always say, all this begins at the university.
Right.
You can't have a tech industry without having a great tech university. So we have tech, but we don't have the commercialization. Now, David Lasner established, or maybe it was prior to him, there is something now that's supposed to replace OTED and maybe slip into the shoes of the kind of work that HTDC, High Tech Development Corporation, was doing for commercializing. I think it's too early to say whether that's going to be successful. So I can give you other examples too, Alice, but if you snapshot the beginning of the 2000s with a snapshot of now, you get this. So some agencies can raise money. The Energy Accelerator has raised a fair amount of money. Some of these startup organizations, Blue Startups and the like, have raised money, not that much. And there's a couple of problems, if you don't mind me going on.
No, please do.
Number one is they take mainland entrepreneurs just as easily as they take local entrepreneurs. And they have a structure of arguments to defend that.
What do you mean by they take mainland entrepreneurs?
That they offer their mentoring services to both. And they say, well, we want the mainland so they can germinate together. But the reality is that, in my view, the mainland guys come, they take the mentoring, they take the money, at the end of the day, they leave. And the local guys are not really getting an advantage in all of that, except maybe to meet the mainland guys, but it's not material. The reality is we don't have a lot of mainland entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs here. We have to find a way to motivate them to have the confidence to believe that they can do it,
So what can we do to foster this confidence to grow them?
We had a device before called Act 221, which fostered a tremendous amount of confidence because these kids believed that the government was supporting them and was, putting them together with investors. That's what it achieved. And I think that really changes the way you think. If you believe that the government and the investors are behind you, that they want your cheerleader team, then that helps you, take the risk. Taking a risk in the Hawaii way of thinking is not a good thing. You don't want to lose face. You don't want to fail. And Hawaii has a natural obstacle to that sort of thing, as opposed to, say, California, where taking a risk and failing is a good thing because it makes you harder for the next trip. But in Hawaii, you need to really support the entrepreneur. You have to give him every advantage, and you have to love him. Have you hugged your entrepreneur today?
That may be a good bumper sticker to have. But with the new administration, with the Ige administration, do you think there may be changes
No, not on this.
Oh.
Sorry. David Ige is trying to balance the budget. He doesn't want to take on new initiatives. Coming up with another Act 221, a successor to Act 221, would cost money, would involve political risk, and here's the critical factor: it's radioactive. There are some things that happen in Hawaii, maybe other places. My experience is mostly in Hawaii. There are some things that somehow get to be radioactive. Act 221 was the subject of controversy in the newspaper, for 10 years. Friends argued with friends. Husbands argued with wives. Everybody was all hoo-hoo about Act 221. And a lot of people thought it was abusive because it cost so much money and it favored just these kids, and it allowed for investors to make a return and so forth. And so, if you went to the legislature today and you said, girls and boys, how about another Act 221? nobody would respond because it's still radioactive.
Wow.
How many, 5 years later?
Well, besides 221, are there other mechanism or incentive that we could have to foster that kind of entrepreneurial spirit? Are there things that we can learn from other states? Are they doing something that we are not doing, perhaps? Because we seem to always look towards the mainland because we always feel that perhaps they are better than us.
That's funny, you're bringing more memories back for me. When Act 221 died, and it died prematurely, it was sunset before its statutory sunset, which was made it even sadder. There were efforts on the part of some of the people who believed in technology and technology investment, who went to other states and did very careful studies of incentive programs for entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs in other states. And they looked at so many places, and they came back and they had a lot of people come here and talk about their models and how they raise money and how they incentivize people, just as you ask. And you know what? Nothing. I mean, at the end of the day, none of those models were accepted. I can't explain to you what the inside dynamics were. All I can tell you is the net effect. If you look today, you have very few structures that are actually doing that. And the structures that are doing that are not necessarily limited to local investors, local entrepreneurs, as I said. And the other thing is, it's not ready. Are you sitting down? It's not necessarily limited to tech. Tech has evolved into general entrepreneurism.
Right.
So that a lot of the entrepreneurial encouragement that you see people trying is not directed or limited to technology. It's directed or limited to either certain spots of technology. For example, the hackathon last weekend at the Sullivan Center in Iolani, which we went to see. That's mobile apps. That's not curing cancer. That's not creating biotechnology like Ed Cadman saw in Kaka'ako. That's mobile apps. You can do that in your jammies at home at 2 in the morning, not a problem. And you don't need a big investment for that. Okay. And a lot of the entrepreneurism that's being encouraged has nothing to do at all with that. There's a maker movement. You know the maker movement?
No.
This is very, very good, and it's to some extent it has had. I don't know if it has as much this year as last year, but a certain amount of traction around the islands where you get to make things. Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's not tech. There are some people doing tech in there, but it's not tech. So what has happened is technology, as we saw it as a potential industry, has evolved from big, curing cancer kind of thing. Building entrepreneur information technology has evolved into little tech, and tech that isn't really tech that is entrepreneur, maker tech rather than tech.
So
and
it's
finally,
more, no, it's more like a craft rather than big technology here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And the other aspect, which I offer you, talk about the Energy Accelerator. This is a very, very good organization, well run. It's a classic example of a well-run incubator, but it's energy. And what's happened in the eye of the public is that technology has morphed into energy. Or put it this way, energy and technology are the same thing. They're not the same thing.
Okay.
Energy is a kind of technology. It's one technology, but it is not technology in general. So I'm just making the case for you that we really don't have the kind of tech industry we had hoped to have before.
Well, but then technology has permeated into so many aspects of life and different industries. So perhaps technology itself has evolved too.
Yes, but I think our technology here has skinnied down. And it is, if you went to California, you would find a whole other mindset. If the old story, who talked about this? The guy who ran the Tax Institute, Kalama was his name.
Okay.
He said if you go to a bar in downtown San Francisco on a Friday afternoon, you'd find guys making deals on the backs of napkins everywhere in the bar. If you go to a bar in Honolulu on a Friday afternoon, you'll find them comparing notes on the football game. It's different. So the point is that the entrepreneurial spirit probably lives most actively at the Scheidler School than anywhere else, and some
Wow.
of these incubators maybe.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that. We're coming on our second break. So after the break, I think I want to switch gear to talk about the well-being of the state. So
Okay.
my guest is Jay Fidell, the founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. You are watching ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Please do join us after the break.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii. You're watching Business Education Spotlight. If you're just joining us, my guest is Jay Fidell, founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. Jay, at the break, you mentioned about you being a curious observer, and I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up this discussion of technology. You've seen how technology has evolved in the state and, you know, people's general attitude towards it. So I guess my final question is, what would it be like in the next 2 to 5 years?
Oh. Before I answer that, I just want to tell you that the fellow I was trying to remember before, who died, who was the director of the Tax Foundation of Hawaii, was Lowell Kalapa.
Thank you.
He could see the difference and articulate it. And he did that, he said those words at a program we organized. I should also say that as the director of the Tax Foundation, he opposed Act 221 too. It was very controversial. Well, how do I see it going? I see it, you know, the myth of Sisyphus. Remember the myth of Sisyphus?
Oh, the rolling the
That's
stone
right.
uphill.
You
and
roll
then,
the stone up and
then,
you get up to the top and then it rolls back down on you and then you start again and again. It's like Groundhog's Day, the movie with Bill Murray, you know, it just keeps on going and going and going. And so we have this struggle. We tried mightily in the early 2000s, you know, to do that. Brian Schatz, when he was in the State House, was very active in it. There were other leaders, you know, who ultimately moved away, moved out, no longer supported it for one reason or another. So the fickle finger of fate, you know, changes it like a sine curve. You go up, you go down, you evolve. One thing is clear, you can never, ever go back. You know, if you offered me the possibility of going back to the year 2003 and taking up where we left off, you know, and ignoring all the slings and arrows against 221 or seeing clearly what had to be done, we can't go back.
No, because it may not work for this day and age though, right?
Yeah, well, you have to, you know, history is an ongoing dynamic. Every moment in history is accumulation of all the moments before. It's like I asked one of our guests one time, Jack Balkin was his name on ThinkTech, and he was the Dean of Constitutional Law at Yale. And I said, you know, during the administration, the W administration, if you will, back in the 2000s, you know, we lost ground on the Constitution. After 9/11, you know, and the Patriot Acts, we lost ground on the Constitution. And can we ever go back to a point in time and sort of screen that out and you know, reverse it and go back to where it was before 9/11 and find the constitutional, you know, progress, rediscover the constitutional progress the country has made since the revolution? Can we ever do that? And he said, no, history is a cumulative effect. So the same thing with technology.
Okay.
We can't go back.
So
we are
moving
here now.
forward, what
And
would it be like?
We have to, if I had my choice, I would say to the boys and girls in the legislature, I would say you have to find a way to act. The government must nod. And the ship of the economy does not change by itself, not in our time. And you have to turn it, by governmental action. That means incentives. Incentives do usually cost money, although really creative ones are free. And that's what you have to do. And you cannot be concerned with the radioactivity, memory of Act 221. You must find another way to show those kids, these millennials right now, that yes, they can be entrepreneurs, yes, they should do tech, and yes, tech can be very productive and profitable and change the economy of the state. And that's what I wrote about in my article this past Tuesday, and that's what I am always saying. Now, whether it can happen in the next 5 or 10 years,
We shall see.
It depends on how often we repeat the message.
And I guess the soap opera continues.
Exactly.
Now, let's shift gear a little bit. I know you also write for the Star Advertiser. You have your blog, and when we talked about having you on the show as my guest, you commented about the insular drift, and at that time I thought, what are you talking about? The geography of the state? And you mentioned the psyche of the state. Now, can you share that insight with us? What is going on? What do you mean by that, insular drift?
It's another memory thing.
That's good. You have a lot to draw upon.
Well, you have to draw the delta factor, how can, what is it, George Santayana has said that if you forget the history, you are doomed to relive it.
Yes, and that's in your commentary about amnesia, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. You remember, you read my thing. Huh?
Yes, I did.
This is community amnesia. So, I think we forget the way it was even in the 19th century, the way it was coming off the plantations, the way it was when these fantastic ethnic networks were developed around the islands. This was, in statehood time, a beautiful place. The connections were huge. Families strung across all the islands. Families that took steamers to go between the islands. Aloha really was coming alive everywhere. And then at statehood, we became part of the United States. I mean, as a state. And you really wonder, to me, the issue of the takeover in 1890, whatever, but, that's one thing. But we did something else as we became a state. And I think what we became was we became a magnet for a lot of, emigration from the mainland. And that meant not only people, but businesses and culture points. And so as we changed, things changed. The way business work changed. And certainly the business school has seen all of this.
So when you say change, what is that? What kind of change? Is it benefiting the state or?
Well, it's made a lot of money for the state. I mean, tourism came of age, and tourism is a huge engine for the state, and lots of other businesses came. And as in every other community in the country and the world, there have been dramatic business changes in that period of time. But I think when you're looking at an island, it's fragile. And when you want to make a change in an island, it has greater implications than it does in a continent, for example, or a large place. So I think we have suffered in a way, and those networks that existed between families, among families all around the islands, all that local culture, has been under threat. And in some cases, it lost the battle. In the years to come, and so we have a certain polarization going on now. Maybe it's a mirror image of polarization in the world in general. But I think, for example, when the people of Molokai don't want tourists to come there, when they warn, cruise ships not to come, when they board fishing vessels, I mean, commercial, recreational fishing vessels, that you can't be here, have to leave. In a state, in these United States, tell somebody that you can't come on my island?
Well, why do you think they are doing that?
I think the islands are drifting. I think the insular drift means the islands drifting away from each other. And that's part of this post-statehood process that we are having. And it's really, really too bad. Some people, I suppose, reject progress. They're not progressive. They're cultural, and some people, just want to hold on to the old days, even at the expense of losing their ability to make a better living and have a better infrastructure around them. So what you have is Molokai doesn't want tourism, understood. Lanai doesn't want windmills, okay? And more than that, they don't want people from Oahu coming over. What's that about? I remember when I was in the service, we used to fly to Molokai for a Coke. We loved Molokai. Go there at the drop of a hat. And it was cheap. Now you want to fly between the islands and all those, remember those steamers I told you about? Now you want to fly between the islands, it's hundreds of dollars. It's really expensive. And it's a barrier to those families who want to network, who should network. It's a barrier to the connection of the state. I think people forget that it's one state, happens to be islands, but it's one state. It's not separate individual jurisdictions. We should all be operating together. So there's so many things where we have, distanced ourselves and distinguished ourselves between the islands, that it's not a good thing for the state.
So do you think it wasn't like that before? Do you think it wasn't like that before?
No, I don't think so. I think people were traveling more, actually, relatively speaking.
Among the states.
Among the islands. And I remember a time, for example, a respectable law firm would have a branch office on every island.
Oh.
They don't do that anymore. They don't care much about the neighbor islands. The neighbor islands have a huge rate of poverty. They do not have as much, what we call social traffic with Oahu. So, and you get a polarization. There's a resentment comes out of that.
Right. What can we do differently?
Well, the first thing is I would bring back the super ferry, another huge,
Oh, that's another
1,000-foot,
another
radioactive era that the state made.
That's another webcast, but yes.
Super ferry was a great way for farmers to farm. We have a very struggling, agricultural industry, and it's you want to compare it with technology. It's the same kind of sad story. Why can't we really build a truck farming, diversified agriculture here, for food security, if nothing else?
Yeah.
But we can't do that, and the ferry actually helped them. It helped the farmers in Maui, bring their stuff and sell their stuff now and make a living doing that and encouraging them to do more, But we killed that, and now they have to ship it commercially. It takes a lot more money. And so, people visiting, putting on their slippers, going to a neighbor island for a recreational day, all the people, even people who could not afford a $300 plane ticket, they used to go on the ferry. And it's really tragic. I'll say that. It's really, really tragic that we lost the ferry and that it's radioactive. Joe Suki put in bills for a couple of years after the failure of the ferry.
That's another radioactive
He tried
issue.
to resurrect it, and then he stopped putting in the bills. He found, I guess, that it was radioactive and it wasn't worth the trouble. But there's no move now by anybody to put a ferry together. And one of the guys that was involved in the ferry, I had a conversation a year or two ago, and I said, what will it take to bring back the ferry? And he said, it'll take the government to bring back the ferry.
Wow.
There's no entrepreneur, no capital concentration in Wall Street is going to do that. They were burned bad by hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not going to do it again. It will take the government. But Alice, do you see any move whatsoever in the government? Not a chance.
Jay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can I ask you one last question? I know there's a lot that we could discuss about the Super Ferry, but perhaps there will be another show on Super Ferry. But ThinkTech Hawaii is 15 years old this year, and I guess if there's one other thing that you would like to do for the organization, what would that be?
More.
More
of what
hosts?
we do, more of what we do.
Okay.
Every day better, every day more. Got it?
Thank you so much, Jay. Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I guess we can put a plug-in on that. If there are people in the community who are interested in hosting a show for you, I guess they can contact you directly.
We're a platform, and we're a neutral platform, and I express my views, but other people express contrary views. We want to have civic engagement on all the issues we can have it civic engagement on.
Thank you, Jay. It's wonderful to have you as my guest, and I look forward to all the other shows in the upcoming years.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Jay. My guest is Jay Fidell, founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. You've been watching ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Please do join us next week. Aloha.